All right, welcome folks. We're gonna give everyone just another minute or two to get logged on. In the meantime, feel free to grab a drink, get comfortable, and start thinking about those questions you'd like to ask our panelists today. We're gonna have a little bit of time at the beginning where we'll ask some questions that kind of came in ahead of time, and then we'll open it up for questions from attendees for the rest of our time. So be thinking about those and we'll start soon. In the meantime, while we wait to get going, we'd love to kind of know where folks are coming from today, how you found out about us, what you're interested in. So I'm going to launch a poll here that we'll leave open for just a minute or two. It should be coming up on your screens momentarily here. So let us know a little bit about yourself. Looks like we have some lifelong supporters and a variety of folks that either work for food or social justice organizations or interested in the topic. All right. I'm going to leave that poll open for one more minute for anyone that hasn't had a chance to take it yet. Make sure everyone gets a chance to get their answer in. All right. So I'm going to end this poll now. So it looks like we've got a lot of folks that heard about this from Lifelong. And then we've got kind of a mix of folks that either work in the food and social justice organizations or are interested in that work in the community. This was a select all that apply, so there could be some crossover there. If we can have our speakers turn on their cameras, then I think we'll get started here. So welcome everyone. Our speakers for this evening, I'm going to let them introduce themselves here. Let's start with Caila. Can you share a little bit about yourself, the work that you do at Lifelong, and a little bit about the types of people that Lifelong connects with?
Yeah, hi there. Thanks, Allie. So I'm Caila. I'm the director of Chicken Soup Brigade at Lifelong. That's our food and nutrition program. And I'm just gonna do a little thank you also to Kimi and Sam for joining us. We've been working with Kimi and Sam on different projects for the past months and months. Not sure exactly how many months with the COVID time warp that's happened, but they've been really great partners, and I'm just so glad to have them here. And Allie, I don't remember what the rest of your question was, but yeah, I work at Lifelong. I've worked here for maybe 7 or 8 years. I started as a volunteer at the front desk and then worked in a handful of different jobs and now lead the food and nutrition program. So yeah, thanks.
I think the other part of the question, and most folks are supporters of Lifelong, so it sounds like they'll already know this, but kind of who we serve at Lifelong. as well for the other folks.
Yeah, definitely. So Lifelong serves folks who are facing illness and injustice. So Chicken Soup Brigade operationally serves folks that are living primarily in King Island and Snohomish counties. We also ship meals across Washington state. And in particular, so Chicken Soup Brigade Food and Nutrition, we do medically tailored meals, groceries that are nutritious and culturally relevant. And then we do nutrition counseling and nutrition education. And Lifelong does kind of a whole person health model, food and nutrition, housing, access to care, aging and disability services, case management, dental is in there. So a bunch of other things. So really it's the idea is it's a one-stop shop. So somebody comes and they're facing illness and injustice and they can access services in any of those areas.
Perfect, thanks so much. Kimmy, we'll toss it over to you.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here, honestly, on this panel, both with Sam and Caila. My name is Kimi King. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Vault 89. Vault 89, we're brand new. We're a startup. We're in our second year, and what do? We look for problems. We see where there's problems, inequities, and gaps in our systems, and we find ways to address them and solve them. Our mission statement is to address historically oppressive systems, to disrupt and transform historically oppressive systems in human-centered, empathetic ways that increase equity and a sense of belonging. So that can be any number of things. My background before coming to Vault 89 was in health equity. And so when I came into Vault, I said, I'm happy to be here. I just want to keep my toe dipped in the health equity world. And here I am. And so I'm able to just have conversations and say, what's happening in our community? How can we help solve the gaps and inequities that exist? Did I answer it? Was there more?
Yes, that's great. Thank you so much. And finally, but certainly not least, we have Sam. You want to share a little bit about yourself, or we could come back to you if you still need a little bit of time there. I know you're on the road for a few more minutes.
I would be happy to. So my name is Sam Chesneau. I'm the co-founder of Wasat, which is an organization in South Seattle that serves American Muslims. We serve people through art, love, and learning. And we try to explore the American Muslim tradition in that way. And I'm also honored to be on this call with you all and just find ways where we can help people and be able to meet the needs of our neighbors.
Wonderful. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for now. I think we have all probably looked at information on screens long enough for a day. So let's just start it off. Oh, we did have a question come through the chat, Caila, asking if Lifelong does nutrition education in Seattle schools.
Sabrina, we do not currently do nutrition education in the Seattle schools. So no to the question about in the schools and about the equity and nutrition. But I would be happy to have any conversations with folks about that, about other resources that might exist or how we can support that need.
Wonderful. So I think our first question we had planned for today was around kind of big picture. How do racial and cultural, social inequities show up in food and nutrition systems? What does that look like? And how do you see that either in the communities that you serve or in larger scope just in the region? Maybe let's start with Kimmy on that one. Or we'll start with Caila.
Just start with a light question of how does this exist in our community? Gosh, I mean, it's such a broad topic, right? Which I've learned. I'm going to give the caveat here that I did not go into health equity knowing anything about the food system. You learn quickly that you can't talk health equity without addressing the food system, right? So it's here I am now. I'm in this space because with COVID, I live and work in South King County. You can't not address these things. And so how does it show up? In any number of ways. I feel like we can look at anything that exists. We can look at, you can walk into a grocery store, you can walk into a farmer's market, a CSA. You can look at something that Caila and I are working on. There's a project we're working on of how do we get culturally appropriate, healthy food to people who are most impacted by chronic health conditions. So if you are, and we might get into this later on, but that's just one thing where I'm looking at, if you look at the national data, who's most impacted by chronic health conditions, and then you're looking at, now what is that patient or client experience like when they walk into the doctor's office and find out they're at risk or diagnosed for these chronic health conditions, what are they getting handed? Traditionally, they're getting handed a Eurocentric diet plan of foods that maybe they have never seen, never tasted, but here, just do this and come back and let's talk about it. So what does that say about the patient client experience? How do they feel valued? How do they feel heard? So beyond just your health condition, what is that experience like? So I think there's a number of ways that I don't need to get into, but everything from production to consumption, I think we can look at every level of the system and identify a number of inequities.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button there. Sam or Caila, do you have anything that you'd like to add? I know this is probably our broadest question we've got going on for tonight.
I think a lot. Yeah, sorry
Sam,
about that. I was muted. I think that was very well stated, and I think it's really important to recognize that for the history of this nation state, like much of this was by design, and I think it's really important for us to as we try to come to this newfound opportunity to be our highest selves, that we recognize that what was designed was meant to be inequitable. So what's really important for us to just figure out is what are the things that we can do to reduce harm, but more importantly, transform the way we think about these topics.
Absolutely. I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind throughout the evening as we talk about that, and is a great segue into our next question, which is, how have you been tackling inequities like these at your organizations? Maybe Sam, you wanna kick it off on that one?
Sure. We started our Neighborly Needs project in 2019 as a means to just be able to serve, and more importantly, build community in a way where we can all do it together, so that we're not necessarily reliant upon the systems that we're designed to not necessarily reach everybody, but really try to find the helpers and find the people that are on the ground doing the work. And more importantly, try to bring what we have, what our tradition provides in a beautiful way, in a way that kind of shows dignity to people. So we started then, and then not too long after we began this program, the pandemic happened, and we had to immediately transition the way that we serve. One of the organizations that we were working with at the time, Chief Seattle Club, had some issues arise where we couldn't work with them at the moment because they had a positive case of COVID. And we wanted to immediately, there's got to be something that can be done right now, because there are still a lot of people that are in need right at the moment, but we didn't know exactly how we could do it or what the best way, because of all the at the time there was so much misinformation and lack of information on what was happening. But we followed the guidelines and decided to throw some pop-up meal pickups, and it did not too long afterwards. It coincided with our holy month of Ramadan, which right now currently we're in. So when another thing that was, that a lot of people in our community rely upon is meals at night to break their fast, and much of that would happen at the mosque or the masjid or at community spaces, and that wasn't able to be taking place at that point. So we had to like find a way to transition that work and make ourselves available to the people, and we were able to, like, you know, in a beautiful way, like serve several thousand meals to our community at a time where there was no real options for that.
Great, Sam. Caila, I believe that you are at Lifelong, where we had some similar major shifts from an in-person support system. You want to talk a little bit about the inequities that we're seeing at Lifelong and kind of how we're tackling those?
Yeah, definitely. So to take a step back pre-COVID, I would say that some of the ways that we've been tackling the inequities through the food and nutrition program are, I would say about 10 years ago, we started to have the culturally relevant grocery program, and that was providing Latinx and East African grocery bags. And those started in a response to what we're talking about, right? Health disparities in different communities, and what Kimi was referencing of the, like, are we giving a Eurocentric bag of groceries to everyone, and what experience is that giving them, and what is the impact of that on people's mental and physical health? So we've been doing those for a while, and about 2 or 3 years ago, we added an Asian Pacific Islander grocery bag, and we've been looking to see, what's the impact of that? How's that going? So enter COVID, and in 2020, we had about a little bit less than a 400% increase in our culturally relevant grocery bag program. So essentially, if somebody was coming to us to join our grocery program, they were coming to us to join to get a culturally relevant grocery bag. And that was like a very beautiful experience, in that those bags, we hadn't invested time in those, but we were then able to, like, listen to community members telling us, hey, these bags are great, and this is how they can be better. And those are the constant conversations. I mean, Sam, we had like a joking conversation about that today, but it's relevant. Like, when you put this in this bag, this is the impact on this community. And those are very real conversations. And so when I think about that, like, I think about a partnership that we started during COVID, which was with a Viet Mutual, which is a mutual aid organization that was working with a lot of Vietnamese elders. And so, we got like 100 people enrolled in the program, and it was great and it was beautiful. And then it was like, oh, is this a Vietnamese bag, or is this an Asian Pacific Islander bag? Because it doesn't feel like it's Vietnamese. And it's like, yes. And so how do we then do we do better to make the bag more diverse so that everybody's getting something like once a month, or do we make another bag type? And then when we were doing enrolling, it's we have a staff member who speaks Vietnamese, and so she translated documents. She's not a medical translator. So then it's like, okay, but how do you actually serve better? And so the more you listen, the more you learn, and the more you see, like, there are so many opportunities to do more and better. And I just think, like, I met Sam and Kimi in these COVID-y times. And I met Sam when he was speaking on a panel, actually. And so, we decided, like, what can we partner on? And he said, this is a program that we're already doing. And so, I said, like, how can I support that with CSB? How can we support that? And I mean, there's been a learning curve, right? Like, so we said, let's sign up people who are in need, facing illness and injustice in Seattle and South King County. And Sam, you've heard me say it a bunch of times, but on Wednesday night, we had 4 people signed up before Ramadan, or like at the very beginning of Ramadan. And then, like, Thursday night, I went to call those 4 families, and we had almost 50 people signed up. And it was like, oh, all right, okay, we've got this. And so, we've just been hitting the ground running and making changes and seeing what is needed. And then, with the partnership with Vault 89, when we talk about medically tailored meals and culturally relevant, it's like, we want to do this giant pilot and we want to impact as many people. And then it's like, oh, but to get something really, truly culturally relevant and really impactful, and to have BIPOC chefs leading focus groups with community members to do the menu development, it's like, let's start smaller you know, how do we do it? So a lot of it is just like listening and changing expectations and dreaming and then reaching and then failing forward. So yeah, those are the things that come to mind.
That's great, thank you. We had a question in the chat here that I thought was kind of interesting. Are there any books on health inequities that you might recommend for someone looking to self-educate a little bit? We can certainly come back to that one too if you all want to think about it for a little bit. All right. You know, I know we've talked a little bit about some of the inequities that have been seen during COVID. Anecdotally, I don't know, does any of you have any, you know, data you'd like to share or other anecdotes of how you've seen disparities kind of magnified in this past year? Just going to open that one up to anyone. Hey, Sam.
Okay, I think I could say that, I mean, having spent a good amount of time in the community of South Park, it's really prevalent to like witness, like, you know, what many would call like food deserts, I would call food apartheid. If you understand the root of the word, it's really important to kind of, you know, recognize that, like I said, these are things that were done by design, like urban planning and building a highway right in the middle of a neighborhood to like separate it to the point where there's no like grocery store that's within walking distance of people who live in that neighborhood, and like there's no real opportunity for like nutritious meals. Things like that occur regularly, and it's not just exclusive to South Park, it's in other communities, and you tend to see it typically in communities where you have like immigrant populations or those that are, you know, that aren't a part of the dominant culture, so to speak. So yeah, I think it's really, you know, and then when you couple that with the multiple pandemics that have been taking place, it just magnifies it. It kind of shows the mirror on ourselves as a society, and whom has access and whom doesn't. And on the flip side, that, you know, not to be a Debbie Downer, but it also shows that the resilience of those that are used to being kind of like, you know, forgotten, and the ability to take, you know, to essentially like take care of themselves amongst themselves. That's another beautiful thing. And I think it's important to kind of like honor and recognize that, so that, you know, like Caila had mentioned earlier, like it's important to, rather than, you know, to amplify the works of those that already know on the ground how to work through the barriers that exist, and just provide support in a way that is stepping back and amplifying the helpers.
I really like that, stepping back. I think that's a good way to put things.
I think to kind of piggyback off that is, you know, it's not necessarily what has become worse. It's like everything is exposed, right? And I think this conversation comes up in a lot of places, whether it's food, whether it's race, it's just everything has been exacerbated since COVID, right? Or since before that, but COVID has definitely exposed these things. And because of COVID, certain things have gotten worse. You look at who's impacted the most. We can look at the statistics. I think even, you know, that question of, are there books around health equity? I don't know if I've read any books around health equity, because the data is always changing, or there's a number of people that I follow, like, you know, nationally, to look at this data, because there's always new data coming in. There's always data changing. There's a lot of different things to kind of learn and see what's happening on this level. But, you know, I was listening to a webinar around the neuroscience behind leadership and the fight or flight mode, and how here we are, you already have people who are at a disadvantage, and then you're adding on COVID, then you're adding on the racism that our country has faced. And that's just, it's making things worse. So if you already have stress, how does your body respond to stress? What does that look like? How do people deal with stress? And And then when it's long term, here we are, we're still dealing with these things. How does the body respond to that? How do our brains respond to that? What does that look like? And when you add food into that, if you can't get to it, if you can't afford it, you can't get to it, it doesn't exist because of a system that's been set up a certain way, it does just make things worse. I don't like to stay in the negative space. To Sam, it's like there's got to be something. Like, what do we do here? I think some of the silver lining has been, now that it is exposed, we're able to talk about it a lot more. We're able to have this panel, we're able to have these conversations to say, okay, now we're all talking about it, what are we going to do about it? And there's an opportunity to identify allies, I think, to come alongside to change that.
Yeah, I mean, yes, to all of that. And I really want to echo that point, like the people who have come forward to, like amplifying the helpers and just like who in the community is already doing this work, and maybe doesn't have access to as much funding or support, and like, how do we partner and amplify those voices and work together? So I think, I think all of that is definitely like a positive that's come out of COVID and out of the, just like the awakening of people's eyes opening to racial disparities. Obviously some of those eyes have been open for a long time, and some of those are still not open. But so just, I think that has been one of the things that's come out of this positively. Allie, as far as the question about like the disparities and maybe like statistics on this, like what I can say qualitatively and anecdotally is that the calls that we as an agency at Lifelong got, and we as Chicken Supergate got, we're just hugely tipping towards folks that are refugees or immigrants from other countries, much more like racial diversity, and those that were approaching and needing services. As far as like the nutrition and food insecurity in this country, I can't remember the exact statistics that were presented to me, but I know that we talked about one at the beginning of this panel about 17 million Americans becoming food insecure. So, and if we're talking about food insecurity versus nutrition insecurity, I don't know what the statistic is on that, but obviously it's more, right? And that's the thing that we talk about in these partnerships and with CSB a lot, is that there's food insecurity there. And Allie, this actually might even be one of the, I think this might be one of the questions that we had talked about. So if it's appropriate, I can even reference the pyramid that I shared with you. If you have that, I can talk about that for a second.
Yeah, I'll pull that up.
Okay, cool, thanks. I jumped. I know you wanted statistics and I jumped to a pyramid. So if you look at this pyramid here, I mean, I think this is really relevant to the point that around nutrition insecurity and food insecurity. So healthy food is both prevention and is treatment, right? So at the bottom of this pyramid, we have healthy food for those that are malnourished or food insecure, right? So when I go to a store, when I go to a restaurant, can I even find a restaurant in my neighborhood? Can I find a store? Additionally, like what food services are available to me? So can I find healthy food, or am I finding just like pop and chips and super processed foods that's really high in sodium? And in particular with COVID, like the access to healthy foods that food banks were getting was just really difficult to get healthy foods. And so the food that we were getting, we'd get a can of bean that had twice as much sodium in it as like a McDonald's cheeseburger. So that's a can of beans. We think of that as a protein, a healthy food, more sodium than a fast food burger, right? Than a double burger. So just, healthy food. So that's prevention. You move up the pyramid. So this is less people, right? So medically tailored food for those that are at risk for acute or chronic illness. So this is like the culturally relevant grocery bags that we do. This is the food that many other community members are putting out. I mean, this is the iftar meals that are being put out, the healthy food at the bottom. So the medically tailored food is more tailored. It's more specific to help people prevent and manage. Then we have medically tailored food for those with acute or chronic illness. That's medically tailored groceries. That's the produce prescriptions that you might have heard about when people go to a farmer's market and a doctor is saying, hey, this is like a voucher to get healthy produce. Those are those things. And then at the very top of the pyramid, which is for less people, but is really for treatment, is medically tailored meals for those that have serious illness or disability that can't shop and cook for themselves. So I think when we look at this pyramid, I mean, this is the work. This is the work. And the problem is that the food that's being put into the people's neighborhoods is crap. It's really unhealthy food, and it doesn't allow people to get ahead, to get healthier, it doesn't give us the prevention that we need. I just like had a moment of hearing myself soapboxing and had to reel it in. But yeah, so like this pyramid, I feel passionate about, and like really is the work, right? So that's why it's so important to be talking about nutrition insecurity and not just the food insecurity. And that comes back to that 17 million Americans who are food insecure. If we think about how many are nutrition insecure, I mean, double it. I don't have the stats, but I will look for them and we can send it in a follow-up email.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Caila. And you touched briefly a little bit on kind of the food chain a little bit. Have you seen it being more difficult to get those healthy ingredients for the meals, or more expensive or anything with COVID? I know, toilet paper anecdotally was difficult to find. Have you seen stuff like that with the supplies that are needed for the programs that you're running? Maybe not. That's fine.
Sorry, was that to me specifically?
It was
or was
to
that
you, sorry.
Oh, I was like, I just talked for a long time. Sorry, I was waiting for, yes. I mean, access is still an issue. I mean, people are having access issues for everything right now, right, Allie? So like the toilet paper that you talked about, the wood, if someone's wanting to make a deck right now, costs like twice as much as it would cost a couple years ago, because access is a real problem right now. So access to healthy foods is a real problem. There's a lot of good work being done to start using land in King County and the surrounding areas more thoroughly, and getting food processed, and like getting more access to healthy foods. But there's storage problems. There's all of these opportunities for innovation that are facing us, and also it's pushing the systems that make the food, that package the food, to make changes, and that takes a lot of community togetherness to impact those really big systems like Pepsi.
Let's switch then a little bit. Sam had mentioned, I loved that phrase that you said, and now I'm blanking on it, elevating the helpers maybe, or showcasing them. I know one of the questions that when we do discussions like this, it's informative, but it can also feel overwhelming. So how can someone be part of the solution, either becoming a helper or boosting up those helpers that exist, or to someone's question in the chat earlier, bringing up a new generation of food advocates and educating young people. I think, Kimi, you had been mulling over this question a little bit. Would you like to start?
Oh, I could talk for days on this one. I think that there's so much work to be done. There's so much great work that is happening. And it absolutely can get overwhelming. I've been feeling overwhelmed by this work lately. And it's fighting the system, right? Like our goal is to disrupt and transform systems. It's exhausting work. So in my mind lately, I've just been like, F it, let's just create new systems. So my mind has been in this space of what does it look if, instead of having to adapt to a system that is broken, it's never been fixed, instead of adapting to that, what would it look like to create new systems? That's a broad question. So if anyone has an answer, feel free to reach out to me. But I think, and this is more of a broad answer as well. But just start asking questions, I think, is a huge place to start. Caila mentioned it about like, wow, we're here. How do we learn about this? Or we get feedback from community members. So how do we ask those questions to get true data, true feedback, and say, okay, yeah, we can tweak some things here and there. Sam, I loved what you said about the dignity of people. Like, what does it look like to treat people with dignity in this space? And how are they not currently being treated with dignity in this current system? And I think it's okay to ask questions, right? Like it's hard for people to ask questions. They feel like they're challenging. Absolutely challenge. I tell people, like, please challenge your system. We got an email when COVID hit. The president of Vault 89 is a former Seahawk, and he tweeted something that set some people on fire. So we got an email that said, I'm a white male, I'm apparently the problem. So in order to help, I want to offer resume help for people of color, something like that, right? So I sat on that for a few days because that was a little bit triggering for me of like why he's doing his motivation. I went back to him a few days later and I said, in recognizing your power and privilege, I would challenge you to look at your current system. Why is it that you are having to offer this to Black and Brown people? Instead, I would challenge you to ask your leadership what current barriers are there that we're having to offer this service to somebody, right? So it's him. I never heard from him again, by the way. My conversation ended there. So yeah, I think that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to challenge a system and say, what isn't being done? How can we do this differently? I used to work at a government agency, and a contract was coming up for a CSA we were working with to get fresh produce to employees. And somebody said, we need to make it this open to farmers of color. Everyone, yeah, that's great, let's do it. I said, time out. I said, we work in an agency with over 14,000 employees, and we're saying, yes, bring in farmers of color. I said, look at the system we're bringing them into. We're setting them up for failure right now. So it sounds great at a certain level to say, yes, let's do this. It's a whole other thing when you look at the process that you're bringing them into. What does your RFP process look like? What does, once they're in the system, what does that look like? How are you supporting people? So I think that there's just, obviously, I get very fired up about this work, and I think it's in so many areas. I was telling the group before we started that I was in conversations of how do we get farmland back into the hands of people of color. I think we need to do more to support what's happening at a local level. And it's just, how can we do things differently, right? Like right now I'm looking at, okay, we had someone reach out to us to say, how do we get some of the farmers, like, how do we do this better? Because one farm might have an excess of a fruit or vegetable. There might be another farm who's in need of that fruit or vegetable because food waste has become a topic, right? That's one of those disparities that's coming out of this, is food waste and the amount of food waste that's happening. So looking at that issue. But how can we connect farmers better so that there's a shared and collective power, right, to do something? So I think it's just thinking critically, it's looking at a system differently, being okay with asking the hard questions of why are we doing it this way? History, just that answer, it's always been done this way, does not work well for me, right? Like, obviously history is not supportive of people of color, so let's address that. And just being okay with that. I'm gonna stop there.
Thank you, Kimi. Sam, do you want to chime
Beautiful. Sure. I also just in that, thank you for bringing those perspectives. I think it's also really important for us to just first look inward. I think the first step starts with ourselves. And it's really like, if you want to see something, you got to change yourself first and really set your intentions right. It starts with the heart. And I spoke about treating people with dignity, but it starts with ourselves too, because we're only as strong as our weakest link. We should have love for all who love, love all who have love for all. And, I think, we can't look at things in a linear way, but in a circular way, in a way that things come around, and everybody feeds into one another. And when you set your intentions right, as a means of doing it for the right reasons, I think that's the first step in supporting those that, because all of those things, like, yes, the systems are unjust, but we have to remember it was people that created those systems in the first place. So what can we do to transform and change, so that the people who are, redefining these systems aren't perpetuating the same cycle as a means of vengeance, or as a means of, like, this system sucks, so we got to change it. Okay, but what makes your system any better? So that's the important thing, is that we have to look first within ourselves and purify what what we don't like about ourselves, and what we can do to help those. And I also wanted to add on something, because I don't want to, like, completely leave the food as medicine conversation out of it, because I really love that pyramid. And it reminded me of, like, something that one of my teachers told me one time. He told me the 3 secret ingredients to a healthy meal. And the first was the people that you eat the meal with is the most important thing. The second is the person that prepared the meal, and where they were at, the heart. People have probably seen that movie, like Chocolate, or whatever, whatever that emotion the cook or the chef was putting in, that was the emotion that was in the food. And then the third was the ingredients that one prepared with. I'll never forget one time I was on tour with an artist, and we were, like, on a very humble budget. And we had the most basic of meals, and it was probably the most delicious meal that I ever had, and it was like some tuna and, like, mac and cheese, and, like, it was, like, so basic, but it was, like, so delicious based off of, like, the company that we were eating with, the intentions that were set forth when we made the meal, and, like, just us eating the meal together. So those are some things to think about. And I know that's a little bit broad and a little, wooey, but it's really important before tackling these systems that we really, like, think about what systems are we transforming, and what will make us any different. So that's I'll get off mine now.
Thank you. Caila, you want to chime in with anything else?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, this is why I really like working with both of you. I love listening, like, what both you just said. I feel that, and I really just appreciate those words. And Sam, I love that 3 key ingredients. I want to use that. I mean, it's true. And we talk to, people about, this is a less beautiful way to describe this, but one of the things I'm gonna, just a client service perspective, we're getting this new database, and Sam, I was telling you about it earlier. I was like, I need to do a run before this panel tonight, because I, like, don't have a beautiful spirit to bring to it until I, like, move some of this energy through me. One of the questions in the database, like, we're doing this whole nutrition assessment, and it's wonderful. Like, we are really able to support people in their medical journey with nutrition, and just to talk to them about what's going on. But some of the questions around there, like social behavioral, is, who do you eat with? Like, who prepares your meal, and all of that. And that really matters. And when we talk about nutrition education, one of the qualitative things that we're finding about the participants in our virtual Pots and Plans series is that people feel less isolated in participating in the classes together, and they're finding community. And so that is not necessarily why they joined the class. There's a lot of reasons why they join the class. One of them might be that they get a free grocery bag every week to cook with. But one of the side effects, if you can call it a side effect, is that they feel less isolated, and that they find community, and they now have people to eat with, whether it's virtual or in person. And I mean, that's the work, right? Like, that's so beautiful. And I just, like, love to hear that, and that we're able to actually, like, track that as a metric to say, like, this is good, and this improves people's health, and this is important. So that's just, like, a thing that comes to mind. And then Allie, another thing that comes to mind about the like, I realize I just looked at your question of the like, what I was supposed to be answering, but versus what I'm talking about. And I'm just going to go with it. And maybe
It's all right.
come.
This is a
circle.
free-flowing conversation.
You know, like I think I referenced this before, but this work is messy. So, like, it is not going to behoove us to just not speak because we don't want to make a mistake, and not try because we don't want to make a mistake. But that means that we need to have grace for ourselves and for others. And that is hard. And like, even, you know, Allie, when we were talking about this panel, I was like, I don't know that I want to be like on this panel. I don't like, cause am I an expert at, and some days I feel like we're doing really good work at Lifelong in with Chicken Soup Brigade. And other days I feel like there's so much more work to do, and we need to do better. And both are true. Both are true. And so, like, seeing how we can help the problem and how we are a part of the problem, because as Sam referenced, like, ultimately these systems were created by people. We are people. How are we perpetuating these systems, and how are we addressing them and stepping back and thinking critically about our participation in them? And that's hard work, but it is the work. And I think that, those are my thoughts on that. I'm going to turn it back to you, Allie.
Yeah. One question that we got kind of while Kimi was chatting about systems. Well, I'm gonna break this up. It's kind of a multi-parter. So first, in thinking about the systems that you interact with, are there any that you're like, this is what we need to really focus our time and energy on? Or is there something that you need or you would like to do that you don't have currently? These are good questions. And if anyone else has questions, feel free to put them into the chat or Q&A. We've got just about 10-15 minutes left for those. So get those in before the time's up.
Allie, can you read the first part of that question again?
Yeah, I kind of made it up from what they sent in, but how would you change the system? What would you do? What do you need?
What do you do? What do you need? How do I change the system? Okay, this is overwhelming work again, right? So I think that I tend to look at nationally, internationally, even globally, like what's happening on this scale. And then I narrow it down to what's happening in my community. So a lot of my stuff comes from conversations. I'll speak to the project we're working with Caila on. Is it just got to be, I look at the national data of who's most impacted by chronic health conditions. Then I look at, I talked to a friend who works in public health who says, I wanted her to, and a friend who is an African-American male who's saying, you're lucky if I've eaten one vegetable during COVID. And if I did, it was probably fried, also has high blood pressure. So there's conversations that I'm having that leads to, what would it take to get him to eat a non-fried vegetable, just one, or if it's going to be fried, what would it look like if he could potentially switch out an oil that's maybe a little bit healthier than the one he's currently using? Talk to a friend in public health. She says, please do something like this because, the sheets I hand people that come into public health is not fitting. It doesn't look like the people who are coming in who are diagnosed with these conditions. Honestly, that's how this project came about. That's really, I was just asking those questions of like, I wonder, what's being done, and then it's reaching out to people that I might know that has led me. I don't even remember how Caila and I got connected in this work, but it was like through this that we're doing, there's some simultaneous work happening that connected us. And you find the people who are doing the work, like this cannot be done alone. Like for myself, it's Doug and I, that's it, that we cannot tackle this. There are people in our communities doing incredible work. It's coming alongside people and saying, what can we do? What do you need? I think I saw something in chat earlier around funding, and that is a really tough one. I'm fortunate to work with someone who we're for-profit operating as a nonprofit with a nonprofit mindset, right? So we have So there's ways that we're going about that, but it is hard. Like, ideally, people with the money should be doing the right thing with the money that they have. And how can we support some of that work? That's a whole other topic that I will not get into. I'll let someone else talk.
I think part of it is really just being the modeling it. So it's really difficult you can't call people to, destroy something that they don't, where they don't see something better as an alternative. So it's really important first of all, like I said, it starts inward. It starts looking at yourself and what are the practices, what are the ways in which I'm showing up, and what are the ways in which I can do a better job of that. What our tradition teaches us, like, we have that opportunity now, whether we all choose to take that opportunity through this being like the holy month of Ramadan is an opportunity for purification and enjoining the rights of those. So like, we're not with, in our tradition, it doesn't teach like, this kind of prosperity thing where if you have wealth, that means it's a good thing, that you're favored, so to speak. In our tradition, it's like, if you have wealth, it's an opportunity for you to serve those that don't. Although if anything, it's a bigger test. So this month kind of gives us that opportunity to really like ramp up and purify our intentions, our worth, our wealth, the tools that we've been given, the gifts that we've been giving, and using it for good. And finding that's the system itself is like, working within your community to be able to meet the needs of those that don't and give them their rights.
Would you like to speak at all, Sam, to kind of what Kimi addressed earlier? The second part of this question that I hadn't gotten to yet was, how is your work funded at your organization? What does that system look like?
It started pretty much off of the backs of volunteership. For a number of years up until 2018, I believe, we didn't have like a staff person. We were based completely volunteer driven, going off of like people hustling and just taking care of one another. When we wanted to like expand the scope of our services to be, to really like, hit in a holistic way where we do it through education and spirituality. We do it through arts and culture, and we do it through love and service. And we, a portion of it, we were fortunate enough to, apply for some grants and get it. We do have some generous members of the community that have donated to kind of keep things going. And then sometimes it's just, it's just really like, in miraculous ways, I can't even say, like, sometimes opportunity, just things just happen to the point where it's like, well, we didn't have any money, but somehow we managed to do this, just off of like, volunteership. But obviously being able to like expand upon that and like, generate, expand the scope of whom is aware of the works that we're doing and supporting us is something that we aspire to do, so that we can, cast the net wider, so to speak, because we don't want to just like, do it in a half-hearted way. We want to really be able to like have an impact. I would rather serve one person in a meaningful way than serve 10 people like kind of like, half-ass. So like that, it's like, it's donations, it's grants, it's trying to like kind of like work the system and find the helpers. Like, that's one of the things that we've been able to do through the past year. Like, we've worked with over like 25 different caterers and restaurants and organizations, and being able to serve and finding the ones that are really like about it, and, and not necessarily looking for, brownie points, so to speak, or a photo op, but are really like, they got their hands dirty and they're really in the trenches and really, aligning with them, and just trying to kind of like, me having like a community organizer background, is just really just kind of trying to like put the pieces of the puzzle together where we can kind of like, make things a little bit easier.
Wonderful. Are there any opportunities coming up at any of your organizations, maybe an event that folks could attend to support your work, or volunteer opportunities, or any calls for specific donations that you're looking for? Maybe we'll start with Sam on that one.
Yes, we are currently in the middle of a fundraising campaign for the month of Ramadan to try to like, this is really like this month specifically is the month where we really like depend on our community to support our works throughout the year. It's the holiday season, if you will. And, oftentimes within the dominant culture's tradition, it's, typically around the end of the year where folks can kind of like figure out how much more they can give and be generous. For us, this is that time. And we're currently in that stage where we're really trying to like expand the scope of our services so we can kind of like really meet the needs that are growing exponentially. And so our website is wearewasat.org. That's WASAT. I can't even spell it right now. But yeah,
at the end here, we'll show it for everyone.
Indeed, thank you. It's been a long day. But we're in the midst of that fundraising campaign right now, where we're trying to raise funds to continue these services throughout the year. And we're really this is just an opportunity, this is like it. I see this as an opportunity for you all, for all of us to really like take it to benefit one another, and really like, it's always giving season, but there's never, even if it's just like, your thoughts and your intentions and your words and your prayers, that those are meaningful to us too.
Wonderful. Caila, you have anything you'd like to add or share about? There was a question that came in for you specifically. CSB's been around for a long time. How do you survive and keep funding coming through Lifelong?
Yeah. So I'll answer that question, and then you can remind me of the other question, Allie. So how has CSB survived and kept funding coming through? So CSB started as a volunteer-driven, cans in the park, collecting change sort of organization as well, right? So that's where we started. And then Ryan White funding, I presume, was one of the earlier funders. I don't know when Ryan White funding started, but I think it dates back to the 90s. And so for an organization that started, coming up on 40 years ago, we then started to have funding when the government realized that HIV was a contagious public health crisis. Then they started to like fund it as something to when prevention started to be a thing. That was a part of that. And then we have a large development component, right, where we're asking donors and community foundations to support our work. And so that's a large part for CSB. CSB, for Food is Medicine Network, there's a large funding gap, which means that like government programs only fund, like, let's say, I'm going to use the wrong numbers. Chris, our CFO, would use the right numbers. Something around like 2/3 of the work is funded. And the other 1/3 has to be funded through development, through donors, through individual philanthropy, through, like one Microsoft employee saying like, oh, this work is great, I really want to support it. And then like my 7 friends are also donating and we're using our triple match and that sort of thing. So, that's how it's funded. And so, like Wasat is a smaller organization with 1 staff member. CSB is a program of Lifelong that has 130 staff. So it's different, but it's also similar in how you do it. You apply for grants and you trudge. So as far as like opportunities to get involved, like I'll just like Sam's plug is the plug that I am currently most passionate about giving in that, like, as I said, this Wasat partnership went from 4 to 50 really fast, and the 50 households is actually like almost 200 household members. And so it's costing a lot for Wasat to run that program. And yeah, that's where we want people to be focusing donations to, so that not only can that work happen this year, but so that it can be healthily supported in future years, because we want that partnership to be an ongoing partnership, right? Like Ramadan happens every year. People are going to be doing iftars every year. We want to be able to support that work going forward. And we want to, have this partnership going forward. It's a lot of work to start a partnership and to start the program. And so we know that next year it will be easier. And so, you know, like thinking of that. So with that, there's volunteer opportunities for that this year, and there's volunteer opportunities year round, right? So we have opportunities for people to drive routes. I know Lauren is here. Lauren, our distribution
I'm going to share
manager.
my screen real quick with a couple opportunities that I know Lifelong has coming up. And as we're getting to the end of our time here, I also want to just give Kimi an opportunity in the last couple minutes we have here, if there's any opportunities that you would like to call out for Vault as well.
Yeah, we're fortunate to be a for-profit. So I would just say if you heard something tonight that gets you thinking a little bit of like, oh, here's a problem in the system, but I need some help thinking through it or how to tackle it, like, please contact us. This is what we live for. Like, tell us the problem. Let's work together to solve it. We do have some funding available for those types of things. So I would just put that plug out there and, man, support the work. There's nonprofits are doing incredible work in our community. So please, you know, whatever you feel led to do, whatever problem you see, and yeah, just be kind to people. We're all trying to do this work. Yeah, just find places where you can be nice to people, please.
I think that's a great message to end on. We have a couple upcoming events we just wanted to call out for everyone. We will have another Food for Thought Roundtable series. We are taking a pause for May with that holiday right around the time we normally do it. So we'll be back in June on the 22nd at 6 p.m. So we'll send out more information on that. Again, this webinar is being recorded, and we will share that out later this week with everyone. We also kind of, I think as Caila had mentioned, we have a double match opportunity coming up with Give Big this year. And so that's a great opportunity as well. You can find out more on the Lifelong website, as well as an AIDS walk where we are promoting our services to support the 14,000 people living in Washington State with HIV. That is on Sunday, May 16th, and you can find more information on our website. We also have some contact information here to keep in touch with both Wasat or Vault, and that little QR code will get you some great emails in your inbox on upcoming opportunities to continue to be a helper or support the helpers out there and be nice to each other. So with that, we'll end it for today, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you to our speakers and everyone in attendance.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam and Kimi.